Hi, I'm Scott Seaton, Music Director of the North State Symphony. Tonight we're going to revisit a performance of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony that the North State Symphony and I did back in September 2015, my first concert as music director of this incredible ensemble. Now, unfortunately, this watch party takes the place of a live performance of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony that was slated to happen this weekend. But things being what they are, we're not able to get together in an actual enclosed environment. But fortunately, we can still have moments like these where we've gathered in these virtual worlds, and I want to give a special thanks to several organizations and people. First of which is the McConnell Foundation, who is doing a lot of incredible work, especially sponsoring community engagement things like this watch party. I want to give a shout out to Richard and Pat Macias, who always generously sponsor my pre-concert talks. I want to point out and thank Rose Crane and Varen McCaney, who always are my conductor sponsor, as well as Karen Coffran. So thank you all so much for your generous support, even now as we bring you this virtual content. So, yes, this weekend should have been Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and we're hoping to do that next season at some point. But for now, we get to look back at the past. And what a piece to look at. This piece that Beethoven wrote in his middle period, supposedly, where pretty much all of the iconic pieces that we know Beethoven, that really define Beethoven as a composer. For instance, the Eroica Symphony, the Fifth Symphony, we have Fidelio, his only opera, we have the Moonlight Sonata, we have the Waldstein Sonata, we have all kinds of things that when most people immediately think of Beethoven, those are sort of the key pieces that pop up. Now, this was also a time where he was, in the middle of slowly and steadily losing his hearing. So, in a lot of this music, there is the subtextures of this deep anger, this deeply rooted anger. And the Fifth Symphony is no exception. It starts out with virtually no introduction, just these four revolutionary notes that changed the way that symphonic music would go in the next decades and centuries. As a student of great composers like Haydn, he had been taught one thing, and this very strict set of rules, what sonata form should be, how you should prepare structures of symphonies. And then he took all of these ideas and concepts and pretty much broke them in a majority of his works. I mean, his first symphony, for example, he starts off in a dominant rather than this tonic key, which you're supposed to do. And was this continuous rule breaker, and this academic side combined with this deep turmoil that he felt and the lack of his ability to maintain relationships in his life, and his increased deafness and his family struggles and all kinds of things sort of circled and combined into one thing when he was sitting down to pen this symphony. And so we have the fate motive, this short, long thing that is now so embedded in everyone's mind, even if they don't know the full symphony, they've heard this motive somewhere. And what's funny is the time when this was premiered in December of 1808, the concert experience was so different for many reasons. One, this concert was nearly 4 hours long. And not only was it 4 hours long, the orchestra was ill-rehearsed. They had only had one rehearsal, and it was frigid in this room. It was at least in the 50-something degrees, but way too cold to have a performance where you're 100% focused on the music and not, how do I stay warm? So all of these things going against it, and nonetheless, people loved it. They loved the music and just could not get enough. And so let's jump a little bit into the symphony itself. So these four notes are the binding glue of the entire 30 plus minutes of music. And you hear it from the very beginning, of course, just like this. And then the entire first movement is taking this motive and somehow crafting a theme by just stacking it on top of each other on these chordal intervals of C minor. And finally we get into these second themes and then adhere to some semblance of a structure of sonata form in the first movement. But nonetheless, everything is glued together by those four notes. And even in the more melodic themes that are more singing rather than just these piercing notes, you still have minuscule punctuations in the bass lines, for example. So listen for that, for example, right here. And once we go past the first movement, the second movement is this beautiful theme and variations that starts out in the low strings. It takes this melody and gives several different variations on it. So you can always feel and you sense that basic melody is present, but it's either got harmonies sort of modified around it, or the melodic material itself is shifted, but with the main notes remaining intact. Here's the opening of that. Finally, in the third movement, we have a very dark C minor theme that introduces everything at first. It's mysterious, it's vague, you can't really tell where it's leading. And then out of nowhere, this original four-motive theme pops out in the horns. And then it keeps going, and there's this incredible middle section in the scherzo where the cello and bass have just this cacophony of notes, and it's just so fast and incredibly difficult to play. And this is an excerpt that's actually on many major symphony orchestra auditions, so players know it very, very well. And then eventually later in the movement, the opening theme comes back. Now, this movement ties seamlessly into the finale of the symphony, and at first you're unsure what's happening. Everything gets very quiet, and the only thing you're left with is the timpani. At first, almost inaudible, and it's just... And he's eventually getting into a repetition of those same three and now four notes, and it's very soft and repeated, and it just keeps growing and growing, and all of a sudden the strings are introduced with a variation on this C minor theme. It's still very dark, but there's a pivotal moment where this C minor transforms into C major, and then there's this enormous crescendo into the finale of the symphony. Let's first listen to this. Now, the great thing about this finale is so many things happen. One, the trombones are introduced. They've been sitting there the whole time, not making a single note, and for the first time in all of 20-something minutes of music, the trombones are finally given a chance to speak. The piccolo is also introduced in the finale of the symphony, and it's this gigantic transformation from this dark C minor to this triumphant C major, and there's no other thing like it. This moment, this transition from the third to the fourth, it's this giant metaphor for what Beethoven is going through in terms of his deafness. When you look at documents like his Heiligenstadt Testament, this letter that he wrote to his brothers, there's a specific passage that talks about how even despite all of these things that are going against him, there is deep inside him this driving force that he must remain for his art. Listen to this. But what humiliation for me when someone standing next to me heard a flute in the distance and I heard nothing, or someone heard a shepherd singing and again I heard nothing. Such incidents drove me almost to despair. A little more of that and I would have ended my life. It was only my art that held me back. It seemed to me impossible to leave the world until I had brought forth all that I felt was within me. So I endured this wretched existence, truly wretched for so susceptible a body, which can be thrown by a sudden change from the best condition to the very worst. So, that's what you hear in the end of the third movement, in the end of the scherzo of this fantastic Fifth Symphony, this transformation, this fighting against all odds, and then this enormous moment of resolution when hope has prevailed, when the light at the end of the tunnel has finally shown itself. So please listen for that, and the finale is this modified sonata form. So you hear this opening statement, and then we go into a few other themes, and then it comes back. This bum bum beam bum 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 makes its reappearances. One big thing to note about the end of the Fifth Symphony: Beethoven loved a coda. This idea of hammering home this tonic idea over and over again. So it's almost like several hammer strokes that just happen over and over again. And just when you think it's going to end, he deviates and goes off somewhere else. And then it finally comes back again. And finally, after all of these moments where you think the symphony is going to end, it finally takes us to that all-important cadential chord. And it's quite a ride, and I can't even imagine how it must have been to experience it for the first time in 1808, especially under such bizarre circumstances. So I hope you enjoy it. I know that we had so much fun putting it together back in 2015. Thank you so much again for joining us for this. I think it's our third or fourth watch party that we've done. We have several more coming up, as well as other Just Asks. So please check our website, northstatesymphony.org, or continue to follow us on social media and stay connected with us. Thanks, and enjoy Beethoven's Symphony No. 5.